I'm back here. Hey guys. Hey Mr. Nikes. Hey everyone. Hello Brian. Brian. Hey Casey Overture. Hey Scree. What's up guys? How are you doing? How are you feeling? I hope you are doing well. I hope you are doing fine. We have something really interesting prepared for you today. Because I kind of wanted to, to create, or at least to explore and to understand how night environment could be done, because I always have troubles with setting up proper night environment, but thankfully we have Brian here. Brian is already doing some interesting things over here, as you can see. We don't know what it is. I just know that something is going on here. Smash his face in cream pie. Hey, Simone. Nice to have you here. Well, without further ado, let's introduce Brian. Let's say hi to Brian. Hey, Brian. I think people should hear you now, and you can hear me.
I'm trying to think of something clever to say.
Boy, well, don't ask me. I will be no help with that. I'm actually really looking forward to this. I also prepared like a new overlay for things like this, because I think I will be having people more often here in the stream, and they will show me their screens. So I prepared like a little overlay for this. Brian. I don't think you really need introduction, but we have a lot of new people here on our stream, so maybe you can tell us about what you do and who you are.
The first question, maybe I can answer. I don't know about the second one. That could be tough. Could be here a while. I'm the Cryengine learning manager, and basically that means I'm responsible for making sure people are able to learn how to use the engine, which is a pretty simple task when it comes right down to it. That was a joke. That was my first joke. No, it's a complicated task, so good job, security. Currently have one other guy on my learning team, Nicholas Gillen, who recently published his first tutorial. We're very happy to have him aboard. And of course, our friend here, Roman, and Alan, Alexa have also been unlucky enough to have been my slaves in the past, but unfortunately they've defected to other parts, so they're not doing a whole lot of tutorials lately. Before the pandemic, I did a lot of live teaching, which is much more fun than online. Not that this isn't fun, but it's nice to see faces and set up a classroom and actually be able to walk around and see what people are doing on their screens and just respond to that. So I'm hoping that will resume soon. Yeah. But mostly we make video tutorials, and also when we make a video tutorial, we also make a written tutorial with the help of the documentation team. So yeah, a lot of work goes into it.
Yeah, and we had Nicholas the last week here, and he introduced us to a really nice feature on how to implement height maps into Cryengine. You can catch up with that in the archives of our Twitch channel. But yeah, today I wanted to kind of get into a little bit dark. I wanted to get it dark. I want to get into darkness. Because I can do like really nice lighting scenes when there's day, when there's light, when there's shadow. But for me personally, it was always hard to get really something neat with a night scene. And you are really good at that, because I can already see that this looks really interesting. There are points that are catching my eyes. There's ground that I can actually see. So I wanted to get into that and see how we can actually recreate something like that. How can we and what can we do if we want to create a night scene?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, the first thing I guess I would say is, as soon as you start to move away from the sort of middle, from average light levels, it gets harder. And I mean both in what we call a high key direction or a low key direction. So this is what we'd call a low key scene, a night scene, mostly dark tones. And that's particularly challenging because human visual perception sort of falls off exponentially. We have a hard time seeing subtle differences between dark tones. when it's easier to see when there's just more lumens to work with. So we can see subtle distinctions between bright tones more easily because you can think of it as we just have more energy to work with. The other thing that I would mention right off the bat, because I love high key and low key, I guess the longer I've worked in any kind of visual medium, the more I'm interested in things that I can't see in life. And I'll come back to that in a second. So what becomes really critical right away is to make sure that your monitor is pretty well calibrated, the best monitor you can get your hands on, and beware of using TVs if you're, building out for Xbox or something like that, and people are going to be watching it connected to a projector or connected to some kind of HDTV, 4K TV, whatever. Those things are super contrasty. It's not the same tonal response as a computer monitor, which is less contrasty. So there are all these challenges. And one suggestion I would make right from the beginning is to really seriously consider putting in a simple calibration routine into your game menu before you ship it. So you can have a black swatch, a middle gray swatch, a white swatch at the very least. And you can see examples of that out there, and just build a routine where you just ask people to adjust their brightness and contrast, and also the ambient light in their room so that they can see subtle distinctions. So ideally, you would go beyond those 3 swatches, for example, and you would have black and near black, and let's say 20% black, even more subtle distinctions than that. And you'd want them to adjust that brightness and contrast so they can see a difference between all those swatches. And the same thing on the high end, because if they're too bright or too dark, the extreme swatches that are close but not the same will look the same. So keep that in mind. I have no control, nor do you, over other people's monitors. And if you really want to push the boundaries and go into this really rewarding, beautiful visual stuff that is harder to do, you are going to need to ask people to kind of create some, calibrate to some kind of standard. I think this is something you guys have seen before, yeah?
I would also suggest if you do night scenes, do it in the night. You get in the mood. You're getting, just do it in the night. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, night is a funny thing. Your eyes are, the more you learn about digital imaging, the more you appreciate your eyeballs because they're phenomenal. They can adjust to such a huge range of light and dark. When it comes to darkness, we get into a chemical process. Just, you may be curious to hear, I may not mean anything to you. I find it interesting. Once we reach the point of maximum, pupil dilation and that sort of thing, a chemical thing happens in your eyes, and that takes about 30 minutes to fully adapt. So if you were to go into a cave, it would take half an hour before you could get to your maximum sensitivity, and then that doesn't turn off easily, which is exactly why when you come out of a dark room into a bright sunny space, you're literally blinded for a while. It takes a while to sort of desensitize. Yeah. So all these things are factors. Calibrate your monitors, calibrate your room lighting, and unfortunately, working with digital imaging pretty much means you need to keep consistent light levels in your space. So bright sunny windows aren't going to work because the sun travels 180 degrees over the course of the day. So you'll have to use some sort of diffusion blinds ideally and kind of keep those light levels consistent and not terribly bright. Otherwise, you're going to have a brighter and brighter monitor to sort of overcome that. And yeah, that's not so common.
So let's say now, okay, I got this really good setup and I'm ready to create my night scene, right, in Cryengine. Mm-hmm. So what would be my first step? Like, of course, I think the first step would be to create an actual new environment, right?
Yeah, so I think the first step actually comes before you open the engine. I already have my engine launched and I have a big level loaded, so I'm not going to restart it. But what I'm going to do is find my window where my project is. And here's my project, right? And we have this thing called a .cry project file. And in the beginning, this is a bit off-putting. It's a little bit technical. It's a plain text file, so I'm going to open it up in a plain text editor, Notepad++. You can use Notepad or any plain text editor. Just don't use Word or Google Docs that's going to embed formatting in it. And I don't know, Roman, is there any way for us to copy and paste text into the chat so people can literally take this text? I mean, you can.
I don't think that that Twitch actually offers you this function, but we can try. I mean, People just have to, copy over if you want to save that, guys. Or you can take a quick screenshot of that. That's also
Yeah, I
fine.
mean, take a screenshot. I just sent it to you in Discord, Roman, if you want to copy, because you have Twitch access and I don't. So this is not the friendly way to start. Like, oh, how bright is this sun? But I'll get to that. I'll come back and explain these things. But you can drive the engine. You can drive engine settings through a command line. You guys probably seen this tool unless you're brand new to the engine. It's called the console. And it's like the command line. If you ever run the command line in Windows, or if you're old enough, as old as I am, and actually used a DOS command line, then you used to typing commands in. So some of these are really critical. Some of these are optional. So this first thing, HDR adaptation, one of the things your eyes does, it's strictly an automatic system. It's automatic exposure, it's automatic white balance, and it's autofocus. And you don't have any control over those things whatsoever. The only control you have is where to look. And based on where you look, and more precisely what's really in the center of your vision, your eye adjusts and it focuses, that sort of thing. So what happens is we dynamically adjust constantly, and we do it so smoothly we're not really aware of it. And we have to kind of recreate that digitally, so that, for instance, if you're standing, let me find my window again here. Find something like a building, not this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. What the hell was going on with this poor dude in this house?
I'll get there. I'll show you.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a little traumatized here. So here's our infamous game SDK hanger, right? And right now it's dark, and so light levels are actually brighter when I have some kind of light component sources here, and the fog is a little thick here right now. There's a little bit of light in the sky, so I've got this dusk look. But if we were to go to a day look, I've got something that's set up for dynamic time of day. So I've got all different sorts of time of day here, and I've got things sort of precisely arranged throughout the day. So if we're in the middle of the day here, and we were to come into this building, the sun is blocked from hitting it, and it would be a lot darker inside than outside. And if we were to stand sort of, let's say here, so that mostly we're seeing inside, which is grossly overlit right now, and we were to look outside, the outside would look extra bright, and it would be overexposed because your eye is mostly focused on this indoor stuff. It's adapted to the indoor stuff. But as soon as you step through this doorway, your eye would adjust and it would close your pupil and darken down. So the electronic equivalent is called high dynamic range imaging, and there's a section of that in the environment editor here. I can find it right here. And it just so happens that, like all things, we've improved this technology over the years, but we left this particular console variable, the CVAR, at the default setting, which is compatible with Cryengine 3.8. I don't know why. I trust it'll change at some point. But if you don't change this default value to 1, you will have no control over HDR. So this is one of those CVARs you absolutely have to put in your .cry project file, so that it's guaranteed that when someone starts the game, either to work on the design and sandbox or to actually play the game in pure game mode, the HDR adaptation mode is set for compatibility with Cryengine 5. That's a very unfriendly sort of technical way to start off. But without having to understand these things, that's just one example of things you should put in your .cry project file. Shadow caching, I'll come back to later. Volumetric Clouds is pretty. You can see them in the level here, but it's totally optional. A very popular alternative, which is far less expensive per performance, is just to use a texture, a sky map, or what do we call them? I never use them. Skyboxes. It's just an 8K texture that wraps around the horizon, and you could sort of use one that captures clouds if you want them. If you're not moving your clouds, it doesn't really make sense to use volumetric clouds anyway. So anyway, that's something that's optional. Volumetric fog is the other one that's absolutely a necessity. The previous fog technology was a sort of faking it with a 2D texture, and volumetric voxelized 3D fog is just so much more powerful you can't afford not to use it. With that, you're going to want to fine tune the way that those 3D voxels work, how dense they are, and that sort of thing. And that's these two settings here. And I see that I have a setting in there twice. That's what copying and pasting will get you. Anyway, there we go. Before you launch the engine, set those things up, and we can ask more questions about those later. All these things are well discussed in the documentation, but it's something it's easily forgotten. So
there's a little question. Mr. Nikes asked, did I see moths inside the hangar? Were there a particle of some moths moving, or
moths? Oh, moths.
Yeah. For Germans,
yeah, it's tough for Germans.
TH
yes,
is so hard.
That's a particle effect. Yeah, just the genius of Victor. Ikes, our explosion artists. He's amazing, and I can't resist putting his stuff everywhere I can possibly find an excuse to put it. Another one here, same thing. The Humvee on fire. It's just a particle effect. Talk about faking it. These are just 2D textures sort of pretending to be 3D. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's do something. Let's create a brand new environment editor preset. So if you don't see all these tool panels, come to this main hamburger menu, go to panels and reset the layout, because you should see all four, the asset browser, constant variables, and curve editor. And just to see what the defaults look like, I'm going to go ahead and create a new asset. Within this tool's asset browser, I can only create environment assets. And I don't know, we'll call this live stream day, just to separate it from everything else. And I'm going to make it active by clicking on it. And things are going to immediately look a lot uglier. So a couple of things. By default in Cryengine, the sun is directly overhead, kind of behind the fog there, and it's high noon. So it's literally as if we were standing at the equator at 12 noon, which is why all your shadows are directly beneath all of your meshes. Not a very pretty sight. Pretty much any visual person's least favorite lighting. So probably one of the first things you're going to want to do is move that. But since you're here to talk mostly about night, the first things we're going to want to do is make it darker. So in order to do that, we have to look at the fact that we have two categories of things that control the look in the environment editor. And the environment editor, by the way, controls mostly the natural elements, and it's not just light. So since it's a 3D engine and it simulates the real world, it controls the wind, the sun, the moon, the stars, all kinds of things, shadows. Too many things, more things than we have time to talk about. But we're going to start with the sun. So there are some things that appear in the left. For instance, the position of the sun in the sky. And if I didn't want it to be directly overhead, I could simply change the longitude. So if I wanted sort of long dramatic shadows, I could lower it to 25-degree angle instead of a 90-degree angle overhead. And now I immediately got some more interesting looking shadows. If I wanted to spin it around the sky, right now it's over there, well, that's my latitude, right? And I can start moving it around. So if you've kind of got a level design already set up or height map, you may want to position it at a certain angle in order to get things illuminated the way you want. But you'll notice, I
just wanted to mention that shadow is indeed dramatic as hell.
Yeah, it is. And also there's another thing about them, which is that they're black. There's no diffuse light by default, but we'll get to that in a second. Actually, you're not seeing the way it would really look because I already have environment probes. I'm going to turn all those off. That's what defaults really look like. I know you've all seen this. The shadows are literally pure black. There's absolutely no diffuse light by default in the engine. In the real world, the atmosphere that keeps us alive traps about 23% of the sunlight that comes to Earth. Yes, I know that it's weird that I have these numbers at my fingertips, but I was a cinematographer first, and I'm still a cinematographer, so these things are sort of fixed in my brain.
I have to, I actually don't like to talk about, other indie developers who create games and stuff, but I see a lot of games on Steam that are released with other engines, and what makes me so angry is that all of the shadows, no matter what they do, they are so freaking dark. And I mean, the solution for this, of course, is it is incredibly easy in Cryengine, right? You just have to, click a button. But in other engines, okay, I understand that you have to do an environment map and do it properly and set it up. But it makes me so angry to see those black shadows for some reason.
I didn't realize that actually. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly dramatic, but if, you walk into one, or I guess if you want to hide an enemy in the shadow, that's perfect.
Yeah,
It's it's certainly dramatic, but I mean, sort of fine-tuning the way the shadows look is really a lot of fun, and that's kind of the art of it. So,
yeah.
if you're doing it for creative reasons, that's great. But I'll get to that in a second, though. So we're going for night. So we positioned our sun, and what I want to point out is that by default, the sun is linked to the time of day. So this curve editor here is our 24-hour day cycle. And as I drag this through here, by default, you're going to see that the sun travels, it disappears completely at night. It's replaced by the moon, which is hidden in the fog. And during the day, it travels through the sky just like it does, in real life. At this longitude, though, because I've sort of fixed it there. So if you keep this linked, all that is going to happen. If you unlink this, the sun is just fixed. It's not going to move at all. It's just going to stay there, including at night. You see it's still lurking over there. You see what I mean? You guys have probably seen this already. So dynamic time of day is unusual. It's really challenging, and we're definitely not going to have time to talk about it today because there's a lot of things that you have to do. So if you are planning to do one fixed time of day, our suggestion is just pick a time as a best practice. We use 12 noon in our studio, so I'm just going to put 12 right here, because as soon as you start setting any variables, you are making keyframes. So the default intensity of the sun, if I click on this variable, and now I see its keyframes, and you can see why the sun is, going from pure black to getting brighter. It's, this hour of the day and this hour of the day dipping slightly at noon, which is kind of weird, and getting black again. If you're not paying attention, and this was my early days at Crytek, to the time of day, or you just said, well, I like this kind of look. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of tweak this. That's perfectly fine. You can start with that approach and take the defaults, drag it to something that's kind of closest to your look, and then start tweaking these keyframes. But don't ever move this time again, because now you're going to be making different keyframes at a different position. I hope that's clear.
Also, there's also one thing that I have to mention exactly about this, because I don't know if you guys know, but I was creating an indie game a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was doing exactly that. So I was just adjusting the time, and then I was adjusting the numbers to that, right? But the thing is, and the game SDK, and I was using the game SDK. If you jump into your game, it will set the time automatically to 12. So then, like, I was kind of, I was asked to release a demo for my indie game, right? And I just prepared this awesome demo for them. And as soon as they started it, it was 12 o'clock, and the lighting was horrible because it was not adjusted to my levels. So whatever you do, either you just use 12 o'clock, or when you use another different time, just make sure to set that time whenever you jump into your game. That's really important. So yeah, this is a really good tip, Brian. Thank you. That's really important to mention.
Yeah, and you actually completed the point, which is that you need to actually use some kind of logic, some kind of game logic, to tell it what time of day to move to, right? And that should be where your lighting is all set up, where all your keyframe values are. There's a flow graph node that does it, for instance, but you can do it in code, or I think probably schematic as well.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move towards night. Let's say we're sort of happy with the sun position. It's not a variable anyway, so we can always mess around with it. The first thing you'd want to do is simply lower the sun intensity. So a little note about this. We used to use a different scale, and this was before my time at Crytek, and I don't remember what it was. It might have been lumens, and I can't remember the math on this. But we then changed the scale to lux, but nobody updated the default or thought that it was really worth updating. So this number makes absolutely no sense on a lux scale. There is no such place on Earth that ever comes remotely close to 200,000 lux. It's not physically possible with our sun. So don't use these light levels. I mean, it doesn't matter in a way, because you can balance to that with your interior light levels and everything. But for instance, what you might want to just do is look up something like this. Can you guys see this chart?
Yep. Chart is visible.
Yeah, so this is, you can find these all over. Just Google real world light levels. And you'll see in Britain, where it's not particularly sunny most of the time, 50,000 lux is as bright as it gets. To reach sort of the max on Earth, 80,000 lux, you'd have to go to like the top of Everest on a bright sunny day. Yeah, it's 200,000 is a long, long ways from reality. Anyway, yeah.
There's a question. There actually. Wait. Okay, Simon. So first of all, so how would you automate changing the time of the day dynamically? I've never done that, but I think just the logical explanation would be to set it up and use linear interpolation over time.
Yeah, so you see that there's a stop and a play button here. If I started this playing, then in game this thing would move along from 12 o'clock to midnight, and you do that with some kind of scripting in C++, and there's flow graph nodes to do this. I'm just not going to go into it today. And there, if you look up dynamic time of day in our docs, you'll find a complete lesson on this. I don't think I've ever done a video tutorial on it. The trick is that in order to calculate specular reflections in Cryengine, that is the only part of our lighting system that isn't real time, because it's just physically impossible to crunch that much math. Typically, you can have hundreds of environment probes, which is what calculates specular reflections, what we call cube maps, where you just take a picture in all 6 directions, and then it's projected on surfaces. So that's baked. It's the only part of our lighting that's static. So in other words, when you change time of day, you're going to have to fade out one set of cube maps and fade in another one. And you could space those out every hour, every half hour. You could space them out every minute, but you'd be in game development for the rest of your life. And what you want to do is just, if I call up one of these things, let me call up an environment probe. So the way that this is done is create object components, and you'll see environment probe here. And that's what I'm using. If you're doing it in FlowGraph, though, you're going to have to use the legacy probe, because I don't remember where it is. I don't use this too much. Anyway, it's in there somewhere. Because FlowGraph was invented before entity components, and so it doesn't see entity component values. It sees that they exist, but it can't control their properties in real time. For that, you could use schematic, or you could use C++. And it's pretty much inevitable. You're going to have to do some C++ anyway. But anyway, what you'd want to change, if I unlock one of these and look at its properties here, come down to Diffuse Multiplier. This is what you need to animate. So you're going to need to change this value. So if I want to fade out, and typically its value is 1, I would go from 1 to 0, while the next set of probes in the timeline is coming up from 0 to 1. So it's a crossfade. That's the only way to do dynamic time of day. I hope that answers the question.
And it was also an interesting comment. I hope you read that. I see a problem in the chart.
Yeah.
Someone thinks UK gets sunshine in the summer.
That's what I was laughing about earlier. Yeah, I know. That's a very optimistic chart. Yeah. I love the UK, but I don't love the weather. Yeah. Okay. So light levels. We want to make it darker. We can turn the sun off completely, and there's no more light. The entire level is going to be pure black. And the first thing you'll notice about this is the skylight is not physically realistic. So it's not truly like an atmosphere that traps the sunlight. It's actually the fog that's doing that. We don't have like real atmosphere. That's something that would be sort of more complicated than necessary. So something to know about the engine is that the fog not only does what you think of as fog, like fog floating over a pond or something on a steamy day, it also effectively produces the atmosphere. And that's controlled separately under Skylight. So the next thing we want to do, like we have quite dark values, anything below 1,000 is going to be quite dark, but we need to come down here to our Skylight, and you can either change the sun intensity or the sun intensity multiplier. If I do this, now I've got my very dark sky. And yeah, this is going to accomplish the same thing. Next thing is that I'm going to just turn off my clouds because it's really confusing the point. Next thing I want to do is give the night sky its, traditional characteristics. So that means stars of some kind. So I could do like that. That's very bright. This is on a scale from 1 to 16, but actually small values will suffice. It's not very realistic. It's as if we didn't have an atmosphere when you get up into really high values. There's a moon texture that's going to appear. However, it's going to be kind of masked by this fog. And there are two things you have to do to get it to appear. You have to set this moon color to something brighter than black. The default is white or close to white. But the other thing that's off by default is this moon color value. Let me make this bigger. Oh, doing it on a single screen, it's painful.
Oh, I feel that.
The night sky multiplier, this moon color's got to be greater than 0. And there's our moon. And just to make it easier to see, because you guys are looking at 720p, I'll exaggerate its size here. This is just a constant, which is the moon size. This is just a 1K texture, by the way. It happens to be a more or less full moon, but you can replace it with any texture. Use Photoshop, export with the CryTIFF plugin to a DDS format. As long as it's 1K and it uses alpha channel, it'll work fine. So if you want to make 2 moons or the moons of Jupiter or whatever, knock yourself out. Okay, let me see. The other thing, I guess the next thing I would do is change the sun color. So at night, the only natural source of light is actually sun reflecting off of the moon. So it's still the same sun, it just is on the other side of the equator, right? We can't see it. And very faintly some starlight. If you looked at that chart again, you'd see starlight is, 0.001 lux, or down to a hundredth of that, or a tenth of that. So they don't add much light, although amazingly our eyes are sensitive to it. But what I'm talking about is, since the sun is reflected off the moon, theoretically it would be the same color. But an interesting trick that you can do to make people feel like it's more night, because you notice this light is a bit orange, it's kind of warm. So we have 3 cones in our eyes that sense red, green, and blue. And the way that they're rigged, we perceive warm colors to be brighter than cooler colors. So a trick that you can do to make it feel more like night is not just to desaturate this, which helps, you can actually make it a little bit blue. So we perceive cool colors, this pure blue especially, to be simply darker, to be less luminous. It's no different. In other words, the value could be the same here as I had it, but we simply, it's a brain trick, right? It's just part of our perceptual system. And, you could go extreme with this and really see how blue really does feel dark, whereas this feels sort of like deserty. I don't know. It's just one of those funny things. I made a joke about it in one of the environment editor tutorials, that this is well known by cinematographers, and Jim Cameron loves blue so much that he literally puts what we call a full CTB, color temperature blue gel, on the lights twice. And all his night scenes are sort of ridiculously blue, but it is effectively make it feel like night. So I misnamed this thing. I should have called it live stream night, but anyway, you get the idea. I'm just going to say what we've done. So what needs to be done next? What do you think?
So, well, first of all, I would get rid of the sun. Right?
Yes. Well, yeah. So here's the thing, is that what you're going to want to do is still use the sun to make moonlight, because we're not literally reflecting sun off the moon. So you're going to need to synchronize the latitude and longitude of this moon texture with the sun. So my moon is at 45 longitude and 240 on the latitude. So I've got to do that. So the light now appears to be coming from the moon. Is that what you meant, Roman? Something like that?
Something like that, yeah. And
yeah.
I think the next step would be for me to adjust the light of the moon to the ground. So I would need to make the proper, or the original, or not, rather not original, but realistic light coming from the moon hitting the ground.
Yes. Okay. So right now it looks super bright, and that's mostly because of the fog. So the fog, like I said, creates this sense of atmosphere. Just to give you a sense of what a profound effect this has, I'm literally going to turn it off. The easiest way to do that is with this CVAR eFog 0. And there it is. There's no
Well,
atmosphere. It doesn't look realistic at all. You see a hard horizon line between the ocean and the sky. You need fog. Fog, um, in a nutshell, in real life, it's not just fog, which would be moisture in the air. The atmosphere consists of dust, um, all that stuff, your dead skin that's floating around, that stuff that you have to dust off all your counters, everything that is loose and floating around and flying in the air grabs beams of light and refracts them, it bends them in all sorts of different directions. And humidity is just a part of that, the gases and that sort of thing. And
so
let's say if we just, yeah,
so the light is being scattered around the atmosphere, around Earth's atmosphere, and
exactly.
that's why we have actually blue light in the first place, the blue sky.
Yeah, well, the sky, since it traps about a quarter of the light, is so bright and around the planet that it effectively acts like a second light source, and it traps more blue light than warm light. And so that's why, back in the Impressionistic days, the painters were the first to notice that shadows actually had a blue tint. And that's because they're only illuminated by skylight. If there were no atmosphere, the shadows would be black. If you look at pictures on the moon, where there's no atmosphere, black shadows. There's not only no light, there's no color.
Yeah.
So our atmosphere traps a lot of blue light and kind of fills them in with blue. I totally lost my train of thought. So I think the main reason that everything is looking so bright is probably to do with our HDR settings. It's been a while since I did this from scratch. Thank you very much, Roman.
You're
So
very welcome here.
thank you for putting me on the spot. So HDR, like I said, simulates, it adjusts the exposure as the camera moves between dark and light areas. And the difference between this EV min and EV max value, as well as this compensation setting, determines how much compensation is done. If I set these to be exactly the same, there will be no change in exposure. There's no dynamic exposure. Indoors, outdoors, night or day, it'll all look exactly the same everywhere. And in fact, at night, you don't need as much of this compensation because there's not such a huge difference in light levels. If I go out on a moonless night into a forest or something like that, it is going to be truly, truly extremely dark, too dark for gameplay, to be frank. And indoor light levels will be a lot brighter. However, even the brightest lamp you're going to go buy at IKEA or your favorite store is not going to even come remotely close to the brightness of the sun. I think you realize that. So, the electric lights that we use don't compete with the brightness of the sun. So without the sun unfiltered, we're not talking about such a huge range. Either way, without getting into spending hours on HDR, you're going to want to set this EV min and max a lot closer together than the default values, which are like, I don't remember, 4 and 16 or something like that. And you'll see if I go back to something like those values, I get very unrealistic settings in here. And it can be really puzzling figuring out, what the heck is going on. A good starting point for day and night is something like this, 10.5 and 12. But it may be that you don't want dynamic compensation at all. It takes a complicating factor out of your lighting. If you turn this off by setting them the same, now everywhere you go, it is what it is. So you can set your light components, which is going to comprise most of your lighting. The moonlight is going to look the same everywhere. And yeah, it's just one less thing to deal with. So it's certainly an option. Okay, another first thing you want to do, another funny default, as I've never sort of understood, is HDR is a post-processing effect. So after the render is done, all the 3D is converted to a 2D image. This comes in and sort of adjusts things. Same thing with filters. And you can do crazy things like completely change the saturation. You can crank the heck out of these colors like that. You can completely make black and white. Or if you're going for night, since we lose color sensitivity in our eye, in our visual system, before we lose tonal sensitivity, the ability to see it all, you might want to just desaturate everything a bit. It's a bit risky because there may be colors in your game design you really want to pop. So a more controlled, precise way to do that is with color grading. And I did a whole tutorial on that you can look up. But just be aware that you have this. The other thing is that this color balance thing tints everything. So whatever you've got this set to is literally going to ultimately replace every single color if you saturate this fully, just like that. So if you wanted to get like I did a free preset that was a night look thing, and I just desaturated everything 100%, and I just put this either a photo filter or a color balance setting on to tint it that sort of infrared green that you get with infrared cameras. But the thing I want to point out is by default, this is not neutral. It has 38% saturation on a yellow tint. I don't know why. Just desaturate it. There's no reason to warm everything up and not realize you're even doing it. Also keep in mind that this value slider is going to change the brightness of everything, so just be aware of that. So those are some of the quick defaults that I would do. Basically, you want to get your most overriding source of light, which is your so-called moonlight setup, and that's going to require tweaking all of these things. And maybe it's still a bit bright, like a really low level. You'll see this in Hunt, where it's just some quite dark stuff. Gets as low as 200 lux. And yeah, it makes for pretty scary navigation. It also requires, like I said, some monitor calibration to really be sure that the players are seeing what they're supposed to see. But, you know, frankly, I think anything between sort of 200 and 800 is pretty reasonable. But get it sort of the way you like it. And then as you plan the navigation through the level, you can put particle effects, you know, things that make light in there, whether they're light components, particles, etc. Wow, time goes fast. We have 15 minutes.
Indeed. Just have a few minutes left, yeah.
I hope you're watching the questions because I can't look at my screen and watch the questions.
I'm watching the questions. Yeah. Don't worry about that.
Maybe we can jump to something that's sort of done. The one that I started off showing you, for example. And yeah, I can tell that I have my probes turned off. So let me come back to here, turn this on. And I've got multiple sets of environment probes for different environment presets. I want to make sure that I'm not stacking them or things will look very, very weird. Things are still not right here. Am I at the right time of day? I am. I had a problem with this level, and I hope that it is not pervasive, or I'll have to restart. Because that's not how it should look. Ay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Let's try a different one. So by the time I figure this out, yeah, this is not a bad night preset. It's not as pretty as the one I had, but it'll do. So we could come in and look at the values here and kind of get an idea how it's done. It's pretty common and certainly simplifies things to use a skybox rather than use the real stars or the volumetric clouds. We love them. We use them in Hunt. It just guarantees that things are controlled. And the other advantage that may not be so obvious is if you have a skybox and nothing that changes, like flickering stars or moving clouds, that means all of the cube maps that you generate, which again are baked, are accurate because nothing is dynamic except obviously gameplay elements. So that's something to consider. Yeah, I didn't talk about ambient light. So ambient light is a huge part of the game no matter what. And by default, the big difference between the engine world and the real world is in the real world, we have skylight. And that is light that's scattered in innumerable directions and filling in our shadows. So we don't have black shadows. The skylight in Cryengine generates nothing. It is not a light source. So you can do two things. You either add environment probes, and those will act as a very sort of simplified, primitive source of diffuse light, or you have to use simple ray tracing, and that's what we call our total illumination, or SVOGI system. And that's one bounce ray tracing, and it's going to be a lot more detailed and accurate than environment probes. And I just want to point out that by default, you may have had your environment probes already created, but by default, they're not used because of this setting right here. Use light probes is off. If you turn that on, the diffuse contribution of the light probes is actually going to be multiplied by the diffuse contribution from Svogi. And that's a very, very different look and complicates things a lot because you're going to have many probes. I usually don't do that, but it's something that's an option. Like I said, the way that the ray tracing calculates diffuse light is just a lot more accurate than the sort of dumb on switch of diffuse light provided by environment probes. So generally, I probably wouldn't recommend that you turn this on. Another big difference between day and night is we have something called the injection multiplier, and that's simply how strong the bounce is. So I have very low light levels right now, so there's not much light to bounce around. But let me go to a day look. There we go, I'm at 12 noon. Now I have quite a bright sun, 60,000, etc. If I would come here down to some shadows, get kind of fog overkill because I've got night stuff going on. Turn some of this down. Doesn't help that I'm looking towards the sun. Here we go. Coming sort of the shadowy side here. Still too much fog. If I were to come to this injection multiplier and turn it way up, you're going to see ridiculous things happening. Yeah, and then my probes are screwing this up because I don't have a set of probes for this.
I mean,
this is what happens when you improvise.
It's fine. Don't worry.
Let me say this, that just to simplify the point, the injection multiplier most commonly would be around 1 for realistic gameplay because it's expensive. The higher you crank this value up, the more powerful the bounce light is going to be. If you're doing beauty shots, you just want to take screenshots, you're a tech artist, you want to make your asset look gorgeous, here's how to make it look perfect in like 3 easy steps. Take the sun or a projector light component, bounce it into a giant reflector, a pure white reflector. You can just model one in Designer and make sure that the range on your light component is long enough to cover the distance of it traveling to the bounce card and then bouncing off of that card back onto your asset that you want to make look beautiful. And then turn on your Svogi and crank up this injection multiplier. And what you're going to see is what we call soft light. It's scattered. It's been diffused by bouncing in many directions off of there, and it's going to make anything look really, really beautiful. Put it at about a 45-degree angle from your asset, and then use another light component or the sun to make some kind of edge light that's coming from the 180-degree opposite angle from that bounce card, just to separate it from the background. That's a classic lighting setup you'll see in every Hollywood movie, every close-up of every beautiful actor ever. Unless we're doing something like a scary scene or something like that. It just works. 2 lights at opposite directions. But using that much soft light by cranking up this injection multiplier in gameplay just isn't realistic. It's just too expensive. It's really slow. You'll start to see these weird artifacts as you're moving around, which is Svogi desperately trying to keep up as the camera moves around. So, yeah. In night, you're going to want to turn that injection multiplier quite a bit down. You don't have much light to bounce anyway. In fact, you may not even want to use Svogi at night. It's not going to make such a huge difference given that there's not much light to bounce when your sun is down at like 500 lux or something like that. It depends on your light components, but something to think about.
So we have a funny request. Request for next time. 1 full rundown on setting up an automatic day and night cycle. And the second request is 5.7 schematic tutorial on that. Yeah.
Yes. But yes to both of those things. I don't think I would do that live because it would probably take a couple of hours. Yeah. But if you guys are interested, I can do a tutorial on how to do a full day-night cycle with dynamic time of day. If I really don't have a sense of how common or how many of you actually would want to put dynamic time of day in your game. So please use our contact forum on the Cryengine.com site and send us those kinds of requests so that we have a sense, or certainly or post it on Discord so we get a sense of how much interest there is in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not 100% sure we can do it in schematic, because schematic is sort of an unfinished visual scripting. But worst case scenario, we have to do a little bit of C++ to make some nodes, and we could give you that code to save you some work.
Yep.
You can certainly do it in Flowgraph, though. It's just, yeah, we can't control the modern environment probes because it's an entity component. Flowgraph doesn't understand entity components.
Yeah, guys, if you have any questions, please shoot them at us. I will try to read them out, and we will try to answer those questions. So also the other thing is, can you show us what's going on the top of the tower? Because that was like, what's going on there, Brian?
I'd love to show you what's happening on the top of the tower and all over this level, but I'm frustrated that yeah, there's just something messed up with my level here. And it's kind of frustrating because it was tweaked so perfectly. Just a couple of characters. They're actually from Crisis, and all I did was mount headlamps to their helmets. So they've got this little funny thing, which is like a scanner. I don't remember the game, and all I did was put a projector light and attached it to the look bone on the character. I did a tutorial on this. If you look at that 45-minute one that was on, what was it called? Creative. I think it was just called Creative Lighting. I can find it on YouTube. I literally just mounted it to the helmet there, and it's a projector light that is affecting volumetric fog, and so they're just sort of scanning around. Obviously, it's pretty fantastical. In truth, he'd probably be using an infrared scan or something like that, because you would be calling a lot of attention to yourself. Wouldn't exactly be a top secret operation. But from a lighting perspective, it really looks nice with fog. So this is a model that Roman showed us how to set up from Kitbash, which has these massive scale things that were really set up for movies. It's a bit shiny right now. It needs some work on yeah, what's the parameter? I'm brain dead. Been at this all day. Yeah,
You mean
this
that?
asset, it's
Yeah, smoothness.
smoothness. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of lighting. I put some area lights in the top, which is just a point light set up to use a whole rectangle, like 10 meters wide. I'm not using shadows because there's sort of no need, but I am using a clip volume so that, because I don't have shadows, that means none of this architecture would be blocking the light from leaking through the architecture. So I use a clip volume to constrain it to the windows. And then down below here, I just modeled some light fixtures, or actually these are from some game somewhere. They're just fluorescent tubes, and they appear to be, they're turned off because this enable for night presets level is turned off. This layer is turned off. Yeah, I'm so sorry, but like something is wonky with my setup here and does not look beautiful the way that it should. I'm not seeing any diffuse light here. Yeah, so these again are area lights. It's the same kind of thing. Not here. In the hangar. So here I hung these. Let me slow down my camera here. I hung these fluorescent lights from chains, from the beams in the Game SDK hangar, and then I just put area lights. See if I can show them to you. Whole lot of assets in here.
Yeah.
If I dare to unlock them, there you see it normally would be the shape of the actual light emitting thing, those two tubes. But there's no way for me to use an area light like this and have a projection texture that spreads it out realistically according to the way fluorescent light tubes work. So that's why it's this funny shape. And another example would be these windows. If I want some skylight, some exterior light to come in, I want to sort of punch up the effect of these windows and make them glow nicely. I would literally take a point light and set it up as an area light and make it the exact same dimensions as the cutout for the window and make it a very, very low level. Again, I did this in one of the tutorials. I think it was that creative lighting one. No, it was the one where I showed clip volumes. Look up the clip volumes tutorial. Yeah, I think it was lighting components in depth was the name of the tutorial.
So there's one interesting question from Pathfinder. Can you control TOD in track view? And that's an interesting one because I don't think there is a direct control function in the track view, but you can use events, and those events go through the flow graph, and there I think you can connect those two systems. That should be possible. So,
yeah, I don't know. I should know that, but I don't.
Yeah, yeah. So it's actually like you create your logic around the TOD. For example, like I don't know, if you have a survival game and you want to to sleep. So in order for sleep, you have to pass the time. You have to pass the nighttime. And if you want to make it visually, like you create a trigger, you create your logic and the flow graph around it, and then you make an event out of that. And you can trigger that event then in track view. That should be possible.
It may have crashed my engine.
Oh well, that's perfect. Like that's perfectly in time, because we kind of have to wrap it up.
Oh God.
But that was
This is. I should have chosen maybe a more simple level. I was all set to show you some. Oh, there it is. Not crash, just relocking a lot of very complicated stuff. Yeah, you're not seeing this quite the way that it should look, but a lot of this night lighting stuff I find is balancing the reality that we have a very limited number of shadow casting lights. A simple thing you should know is the projector lights are slightly cheaper, or somewhat cheaper than point lights because they can only emit in one direction up to a 180-degree angle, whereas point lights are like light bulbs. They emit light in every direction, so they're going to be inherently more expensive. But we still can't have so many shadow casters. So even if you look at this hangar and you were to move around it like I am, there must be 100 lights in here. There are lights on every side that I added. Every one of these Humvees, I've added maybe 8 lights to. I've added glow textures for the headlights because this isn't Game SDK. These are Game SDK assets, but this isn't Game SDK code. These vehicles aren't drivable. I'd have to do it in schematic or code. And you can see there's two different versions of that Humvee. I added tail lights, this tailpipe particle effect, which is way too bright. I haven't been using English enough these days. The running lights are also lit up, and my brain keeps switching to German. And every one of these fixtures has an area light on it, but none of them cast shadows. So what I'm saying is that it's a very careful balance between shadow casting lights and non-shadow casting lights. An example, one of the very few shadow casters in here is this table lamp right here. So I think so much fog is going on that you don't see it, or maybe I'm wrong about that. But it should be a shadow caster. I know at one time I would have set it up there. All of this begins with, is the player going to go anywhere near it? If the player is going to get close to it or something's not going to pass through, that the absence of a shadow is going to become obvious, there's no reason to turn on shadows. And it's just a reality that shadows are expensive, and you're going to have to be really careful about the design. Another thing is lights affecting fog, which also looks super cool. But if you notice, these fluorescents are not affecting the fog, again, because I can't find a way to do a projection beam that appears to come exactly from this shape, but then spreads naturally. And having them illuminate the fog just makes that painfully obvious. Back here, these do affect the fog, and the fog is just too dense right now, which is why it looks ridiculous. But if the fog was tweaked, it would look super nice. It's just not as obvious when it's back in this confined space. The projector lights from the headlights obviously do need to cast shadows because the shadows are very prominent, and there's no way to kind of fake that with one of these making a shadow and one of them not doing it. Yeah. Yeah, I talked more about night, and we could talk about night for days, no pun intended. Other subtle things like diffuse bias, because this is going to control your blacks. anything above 0 is going to avoid pure black, but very small numbers are going to be enough. Anything above that is going to start to look ridiculous. Yeah, we could go on and on and on. There's so much to talk about.
Well, yeah, I mean, always intend to puns, yeah. Yes, Simone. Yeah, we can wrap it up here. Yeah, guys, thank you very much for your time. Brian, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot as well. And
thank you for everybody for coming. And yeah, I would love to interact with your comments more, but I can't drive the engine and do that at the same time. But it's just gratifying to know that you're out there and that you're interested, and keep the requests coming. I hope you'll join us for tomorrow's live Q&A.
Yeah, that's really important.
We'll specifically talk about tutorials and give you a chance to interact with us and let us know your requests and tell you about upcoming plans, and you can let us know hopefully those are things that are going to look helpful for you. A lot of them have been long requested. We're at kind of a weird time with the engine development, and we're all waiting for the next big release. But in the meantime, we're going to help you do everything we can with Cryengine 5. So
exactly, yeah. Yeah. So please make sure that you that you are there, that you are a circle, if you know what I mean. Well, what's going? No. You have to. Oh, now I see what's going on.
This poor guy has spent too much time in front of Cryengine, as you can see. There he is, doing Cryengine.
He summoned.
And then he was summoned. And this bear has now scared him straight. I don't know. I put this in a tutorial at some point. I just kind of amused myself. It was a fun scene to make. Like, to make these realistic computer monitors was actually pretty tricky.
How did you project the textures of Cryengine into there?
Well, I obviously started with screenshots, and then I just did a reference image so that lighting doesn't affect it. And there's one, if you really want to look at the realism of it, there's one thing missing, which is no reflections off the glass screen. It's literally as if we were in the engine. That's exactly the colors that were screen captured.
That's just a good monitor.
A very good monitor. When you use the reference image shader, that's what happens. It just is unaffected by lighting. So obviously that's not quite realistic. If I added a thin piece of glass on top of this and let it catch some reflections, that would be sort of the creme de la creme on here. And then I put area lights exactly the size of the monitors that are shadowless, and that's what gives this nice glowing kick off of there.
This looks awesome. I like
that.
Yeah,
and then, when you're in small spaces like this, then you want to get increasingly detailed with environment probes that are sized to the room or even to a small area. So you start with your global environment probe, which usually we make 10,000 meters in every direction, and then we'll put a grid, let's say 100 meter environment, cube maps that overlap about 10%, and then we start getting down into these specific interior spaces, and they're going to have their own cube maps. Just remember to set your sort priority and keep incrementing that as you go. The global should be the only one that's set to 0 on sort priority, and then as they get smaller and smaller, that number should increase. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to lighting.
I like the scene. I really like the scene. That's actually a great scene.
I come from a film background, so to me this is fantastic fun. I wish my lighting was working right now so it didn't look black. But it's like the cheapest set design ever.
It's a great one. Well, okay. Thank you, guys. And thank you, Brian. And hopefully I'll see you in the next stream. And guys, I'll see you in the next stream here as well, hopefully. And yeah, don't forget, tomorrow at 5 Central European Summertime. Yeah.
See you then.
Be around and don't be square.
Ciao, amigos.
Ciao, ciao.